Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. We're really excited to share with you what we've been working on this summer, which is trying to understand homelessness in King County. And this is our project team, our project lead and data scientist, and the 4 of us student fellows. So in 2024, more than 16,000 people were reported to be experiencing homelessness in King County, which is the greater Seattle area. And this is about a 20% increase from 2022. So this is a population that's growing and growing quickly. Our work this summer is part of a broader project that aims to understand the scope of homelessness in King County using a sampling method that can produce estimates like the one that I just shared with you. However, homelessness is really complex, and these numbers don't sufficiently capture what it's like to live unhoused. So this summer, what we were really focused on was trying to understand the people behind these numbers. So things like, what are their demographics? Where are they sleeping? How long have they been homeless? What are their needs, etc. And to give you a bit of background, determining the overall size of the homeless population in a given area is really important because it's required by the federal government and it determines how funding is allocated. And to conduct such a census of the unhoused population, we can use records from shelters to quantify sheltered homelessness, but the unsheltered homeless population is much more difficult to reach. And these are people who are, by definition, living in places that are unfit for human habitation. So that might be somewhere like a tent or a car, an abandoned building, et cetera. And then prior to 2022, the unsheltered homeless population was counted with a visual census. And this is pictured on the right. So one night a year, a group of volunteers would go out with flashlights and clipboards and literally attempt to count every person that they saw sleeping outside. This method has some notable limitations. So firstly, it's invasive and dehumanizing. These people are having flashlights shown in their faces when they're trying to sleep. Secondly, people are undercounted. So the census was conducted in the winter, which is a time when it's especially brutal to be sleeping outside. And also unsheltered homelessness isn't always visible. So if someone's sleeping in a bus or in a public library, they might just not get counted. And then finally, there's no sense of these people's demographic information or needs because they're just being tallied. And so to address some of these limitations from 2022 on, King County adopted something called respondent-driven sampling, or RDS, which Felix will describe in more detail.
Right. So now I want us to take a closer look at the methods that we are trying to address. So when we think about homelessness, it is crucial to understand the diversity within these subgroups. The goal of this is to ensure that at least the approach we are using is addressing homelessness in a more comprehensive and inclusive as possible, where we take into account these diverse experiences. Now, what is RDS? That is what we are trying to do. RDS stands for the respondent-driven sampling, which was proposed by a sociologist called Douglas Hackington in 1997. The method itself is not just for data collection, it's also for statistical references as well. So it is always very important to have an estimator for this analysis to be chosen, which sometimes you can choose the RDS too. The RDS itself is more of a chain referral sampling procedure. When we say a chain referral sampling procedure, what we are trying to say is that it allows us to have to reach a broader and have a more diverse segment of the population. That is mostly the hard to reach population. And why we chose the RDS as compared to the visual sensors. The RDS is very important. One, the RDS uses a more mathematical models to adjust the biases due to the non-random recruitment processes that had been found in the previous. And again, it estimates the population characteristics accurately, even among the groups that are often underrepresented. So putting into this account, it's very important for us to use the RDS as compared to the visual sensors. Now, we will discuss some key components of the RDS sampling procedure, which is very essential for gathering our data. So the RDS itself starts with a few initial participants known as seed. So we do what we call a seeding. They are the starting point of our peer-to-peer recruitment procedures within the network sample that we are looking at. So seed are not just randomly selected. It is carefully selected based on some specific conditions. So instead of us to select just the seed, what we do is that we take some assistance from outreach workers, some service providers, and some community liaisons to choose those individuals who are well connected within the unhoused community that we are trying to address. So these seats, then they would recruit our participant for us, and this peers where they recruit, they in turn also recruit participant as well, where it creates what we call a recruitment event. So each recruited pair is given at least 3 sets of coupons to recruit an additional participant from their social network. So that is how the seed and the recruitment chain works. Then finally, there is what we call the successive wave. So in the successive wave, as a recruitment continues, each new participant is also given a 3 coupon to recruit 3 more individuals. So which in one way or the other created this successive waves of participants for us. So this is what we call the chain referral process. It will continue until our sample size, we reach the desired sample size that is required for our study. So when going through it allows the sample to grow through this natural social connections that we are trying to find, and we are able to better understand or probably capture the representative snapshot of the population of study that we are trying to look at. So this ensures that our sample that we've taken is comprehensive, not just comprehensive, but also reflective of the broader homelessness community that we are trying to address at the moment. So having discussed this method, briefly describing this method, I would allow Jess to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Basically, our work at DSSG started this summer where data collection left off. Our main goal this summer was to use RDS estimation methods to address questions about the unhoused population that we weren't able to answer before with just a visual census alone. So with that in mind, our first task was to tidy and transform the survey data that had been collected in 2023. This involved, among other things, cleaning open text columns, imputing new variables as necessary for analysis, and of course, documenting everything. The next part of the work was, as Felix discussed, creating estimates for the variables using respondent-driven sampling estimation methods. This allowed us to create accurate measures of the proportion of the unhoused population that have certain characteristics. And then finally, using these estimates, we reported our findings to service providers, agencies, and other stakeholders on questions of interest to them. This summer, we had 3 key stakeholders. The first was the VA Homeless Patient Aligned Care Team, which is a group of social workers and medical providers working with homeless veterans in Puget Sound. They were interested in understanding more about the needs of veterans in experiencing homelessness in King County. The second stakeholder was Dr. Graham Press, who works in the city of San Jose, which is interested in adopting the RDS method for their own community. Dr. Press himself works with people living in vehicles and was interested in finding things related to that for King County. And then our final stakeholder was the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. This is the agency that conducts the annual RDS count and survey. They want to understand more about the population experiencing homelessness in King County, and especially the unsheltered population, which is hard to learn about by other means. Furthermore, as implementers of the RDS count, they were also interested in understanding more about potential ways to improve the survey process itself. So as you can see, each of our stakeholders were interested in different groups and in different questions. RDS methods allowed us to address their unique interests because it allowed us to not only count the overall population, but also create estimates of subpopulations, answer specific questions quantitatively, and also represent qualitative responses. So, unlike the visual census, RDS allows us to calculate the proportion of a population belonging to different groups with some levels of confidence. Each of our stakeholders was interested in understanding the relative size of their populations of interest. So first, using RDS estimation, we found that, for example, veterans make up 11% of the homeless population in King County with a 95% confidence interval of 8% to 14%. Then people living in vehicles make up approximately 13% of the homeless population in King County, and people living outside, either in tents or uncovered, make up approximately 47% of the population. Likewise, in addition, the RDS method also allows us to answer more precise questions about the needs, demographics, and experiences of the unhoused population. Each of our stakeholders this summer came to us with different questions. For instance, the VA was interested in understanding what services veterans may or may not be receiving. With that in mind, they wanted to know if most unhoused veterans were receiving VA benefits or not. We found through survey data that only an estimated 24% of homeless veterans were receiving VA benefits. This in turn informed the VA teams about the needs of the population they served. And similarly, Dr. Press was specifically interested in policy around safe parking spaces for people who sleep in their vehicle. Many cities reserve a number of these safe parking spaces for women and children specifically, and he wanted to know if this policy made sense given the demographics of individuals living in vehicles. We found that 39% of people living in vehicles are female, as compared with 25% of other homeless individuals, though this difference was not statistically significant. And then finally, for the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, we're also able to answer questions about the experience of people living unsheltered. For instance, we found that the vast majority of people living outdoors, 76%, have been unhoused for over a year, a significant amount longer than other unhoused people. And then finally, in addition to creating population estimates and answering questions quantitatively, the RDS survey also collects qualitative responses from participants. For instance, the 2023 survey asked a question on the left about daily needs. The most common needs respondents mentioned in their answers, represented in the word cloud over here, were about hygiene needs such as showers and laundry, food, social services, transportation, and housing itself. In this way, the RDS survey also gives us a better understanding of the experiences of the homeless population in King County in their own words. I'll now hand it over to Brooke.
Yes. Okay, so as we've just heard, respondent-driven sampling has given us an excellent way of combining the count with the survey method and some powerful quantitative and qualitative insights into the unhoused population. Those are insights that will inform the work of our service providers and ultimately hopefully benefit those who are living unhoused. That said, we know that no survey method is perfect. And a part of our work this summer was getting feedback about the method and ways to make improvements. So we heard from some of our stakeholders about ways to improve questions, also identified need for extra support for locations that are hosting the survey. But one of the main, most important stakeholders in our work are those who are living unhoused. So remember, a critique of the old visual census method was that people don't get a voice in how they're counted. And so the new method not only allows us to give people more of a voice in choosing whether or not to come in to be surveyed, but we can also meet with folks and ask about the experience in hopes of improving the method. So towards that end, we had a focus group. It was held at Aurora Commons. That's a daytime drop-in center for those experiencing homelessness in the Green Lakes area. We had 15 participants who came in. And one gentleman had this to say. He said, "You've been passed around in the system so much and driven to be a number you don't want to be. You want to find every way to not be that number." So it was really important to us to listen to feelings like this and hopefully look for methods to continue to improve the survey. So some of the challenges, this is one of the main, there were a lot of challenges and suggestions that came up, but one of the main points that people talked about was feeling like some of the questions feel invasive, asking very personal information about substance use and mental health, and feeling like they didn't trust sharing that personal information with people who are doing the surveys. And towards that end, there were a lot of great suggestions about utilizing trusted providers. People mentioned people who they are working with, who they do have a lot of trust with, and they would be more likely to share information with those providers. Explaining why some questions are asked, and rephrasing some questions so that they're asked in a more sensitive way. And also branding. People talked about being asked a lot of questions and distinguishing this survey from all the other ways that people are asked to share sensitive information. So we're almost at the end. Do we understand homelessness now? If we'll remember, Rebecca talked in the beginning about how we're moving from this old visual census that was flawed into a new method, which Felix shared as a robust statistical way of estimating the unhoused population. And Jess showed us how this new tool can be used to provide for some powerful quantitative and qualitative insights into the unhoused population. So we have a better understanding. But I really liked the question that one of our focus group participants shared, and they asked, you guys do a survey, but do you act on it, right? What do you actually do? And I think that's the critical question. And I think the response is twofold. We use the data to advocate for funding and policy and work towards ending homelessness. But we also acknowledge the limitations because the work of true understanding extends beyond the numbers. One focus group of participants said, you're going to try and quantify the pain, the emotional, mental pain, and some of it's just not quantifiable. I think one of the most valuable parts of this fellowship for all of us was hearing the lived experience and hearing the stories of people who are living unhoused. Sometimes the numbers are the answer, but more often than not, they're just the starting point. The very beginning of understanding that comes from meeting our neighbors, housed and unhoused, of doing the work of building a resilient community together. Thank you. Of course, tremendous thank you. There were so many people whose work we've built on. We could not have done this without them. And we're happy to take any questions. Okay.
I have a small technical question. You had the needs, you had the graphic with the words, and then the size corresponds to the statistics I assume. So I noticed that there is shower and showers as two different words. Why is that?
That was just a visualization. In addition, we also did a more qualitative analysis where we combined those categories as well. But that was just a representation of the words themselves without much transformation. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
The next question. Can you repeat it?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, close.
I have a couple questions that maybe you didn't ask in the surveys, but one is the percentage of unhoused who were housed in the region before becoming unhoused. And that used to be as high as 70%. That is, these are not people who moved here to be homeless. They are us. And I don't know if you determined if that's still the case, if you collected that data. And the other is pathways into homelessness. I'm interested if you have data on that. You know, so you lose your job, you have a medical emergency, you exit foster care. Any knowledge of either of those questions based on the surveys?
So one of the questions is about where people were last housed. Previous data shows that up to 70% of people who are living unhoused in the Seattle area are from King County area. And then the follow-up question was data about pathways into homelessness. Yeah. And we haven't that data in terms of where people were last housed. There is information about where people were born and how long they've been experiencing homelessness. We didn't do that part of the analysis so far. And then pathways into homelessness. Yeah, I think we don't have
I think
that right now.
I think
We have a few things.
A few
We
things.
also look at a picture.
Yeah.
Picture 15. And then there's other data from other sources that is used.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something some of our stakeholders also brought up about wanting more questions about like how people became homeless. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.